Hi there, my name is Philip Wells, and I am the person behind the website TexasPanhandleSports.com. And right now I'm sitting here with Warren McCarty. You're much more likely to know him than you are me, but that's cool. He is the person behind the website MyPassionIsFootball.com, as well as the radio show of the same name. And that radio show is heard here in the Panhandle from 9 until 11 every weekday morning on 1440 ESPN. And Warren's radio show is it's growing right now, and it's about to take another step in its life, I guess you'd say. And like a giant tree that would have roots deep into the ground, Warren's radio show and where it's going has roots deep in his background, his time spent here in the Panhandle, playing football, growing up as a football fan, and progressing from there. And so we're going to ask him some questions and talk about where his radio show has come from, where his life has been, and where his radio show is going to go from this point on.
Appreciate you having me.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Very cool.
First off, the name. That's such a unique name. It's a cool name. I think it really catches, it just jives with people.
Yeah.
Easy to remember. So where'd that come from?
My wife.
Cool.
We're having a whole discussion about, okay, what am I going to name the website? What am I doing? And I always felt like as a player that I tried to play the game with passion. And I admired coaches who were passionate about coaching the game. Looked up to players, at the college and pro level who I felt like were passionate about the game. So passion has kind of always been a word with me. And pretty much any good idea I've ever had has really just come from my wife, Amanda. And she said, you should just call it My Passion is Football. It is your passion. So we looked it up. The website name was available, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Well, that's cool that you touched on your wife, and I want to get back to that a little bit here in just a minute. But first, I want you to kind of trace a little bit from even from the earliest point of playing kids inc football. I guess you played kids inc football here in the Panhandle, and where it took you from there as a high school football player, college, and all that, and what you did afterwards.
Well, I've got to give a lot of credit, and I've done that on my show, but I've got to get a lot of credit to my cousin Regan Providence, who was obviously I looked up to him. He was 2 years older than me, and growing up as a little kid here in West Texas, family's important, folks, here in West Texas, and I spent a lot of time with him when I was really young in elementary school, like on weekends. And some of my earliest memories of hanging out with my cousin Regan are his dad and him watching football on Sundays. And I still remember him yelling out, "Pa, the 10-minute ticker's on." Remember that? CBS used to have the 10-minute ticker with all the scores, and that was like really innovative. And I remember that, and I always remember wondering why they were so fired up about this football stuff on Sundays. And I remember on a Sunday, spending the afternoon with Regan and his dad Glenn, and them just being engrossed in football. And I thought, man, this is so boring. There's nothing to do. This is not fun. They're just watching these games on TV. My cousin Regan told me, he just kind of said, this is how it's going to be. You're going to love football. You're going to watch the Dallas Cowboys tomorrow night. Kind of like gave me a homework assignment. And then he said, you can also like one other team based on color, but it can't be the Washington Redskins. So
Exactly.
One of my favorite colors as a kid was orange. So I loved the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I figured out that they were orange. Had those old orange and scarlet uniforms, so that was my team. They were horrible throughout the 80s and 90s, but they were my team. And of course, growing up here in Texas, you had to like the Dallas Cowboys. So the very first actual football game I remember watching was Monday Night Football in 1984, Dallas at Miami. I watched the entire game. Miami won 28-21. And I literally have been hooked on football since. Could not get enough as a kid. ESPN was kind of really starting to flourish there in the mid to late 80s, and obviously I was glued to ESPN. I was watching Australian rules football, CFL tape delay games on ESPN, and then when they got the Sunday night contract, I watched that, and I was just absolutely engrossed in pro football, college football, anything I could get my hands on.
Cool.
And then started playing tackle football in 4th grade. Kids inc, just like many kids in this area do. And was a quarterback from day one, and I've loved it ever since.
Who's your coach at Randall?
Alan Cornelius was my head coach, and obviously, you know, he was a head coach who had well over 100 wins in his career and had an extraordinary amount of success. And I guess one of the things I have to give credit to him for, that I learned from him and watching, was his preparation in terms of organization and having every detail covered in his game plan and our practice plans, roster, every aspect of Randall football he had covered, and he had it on a computer and on paper. Might have been a little bit ahead of his time for the high school level in terms of organizational skills, but he was, I mean, OCD almost. You know, he was extreme. But I was also blessed in terms of the coaches I played under that were assistants under him. So many of those guys went on to be real successful head coaches. You know, David Wood was our offensive coordinator, who's won a state title at Muleshoe, and you know, was a great player here at West Texas and played in the NFL for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Chad Watson, who's the offensive coordinator at Boys Ranch. Mike Lozano is our defensive coordinator, who's the head coach there, and obviously has made that into a playoff caliber program.
Yeah.
It's been tremendous. Blair Brown was a great influence on me. He ended up being a head coach at Hart and Wellington. Ross Taylor, Al Mullins, just that entire staff. I was so blessed to have that many incredible coaches on one staff that had played D1 football, had had a taste of professional football, and then were just outstanding high school coaches. So all those guys were great influences on me.
So tell me about your college experience.
Okay. I had dreamed, you know, about the time I got to 4th or 5th grade, and really realized that not only did I love watching football, I loved playing it. I wanted to play college football, and I was going to play in the NFL. I was going to be a quarterback, and that was the plan. Part of my college football recruiting experience is why I do my combine today. It was not proactive. Everything was reactionary during that time in the early 90s in terms of how kids were recruited. And we didn't get our recruiting mail until season ended. All the recruiting mail didn't go to your house, went to the school. And that was also during a time when HIPAA laws went into effect. So college coaches could call a trainer, get that, you know, the medical information on the kid, and they realized I had a concussion. All of a sudden, the opportunities weren't there for me that I thought would be. And really had to, you know, beat up after my senior year. We had an unbelievable season, first undefeated season in Randall history, went deep in the playoffs. But when my last game was over, I was emotionally beat up, physically beat up, had concussions, torn MCL on my knee, shoulder issues. Was really questioning whether or not I wanted to play college football. That first fall out, you know, once college recruitment I didn't have 50 Division I offers like I felt like I should have. And the coaches that were calling and talking to me were expressing concern about injuries. It was just kind of a perfect storm of me that I'm done with it. That first fall, coming back and watching a Randall game made me realize, oh man, this is not right. If I'm not going to play, I have to be involved in the game somehow. And so that kind of started to set the wheels in motion. I was going to school at Emerald College and working 4 part-time jobs to kind of help make it happen. And before you know it, I was getting involved in pro football.
Yes, obviously that desire was still there, and it never was going to take you places. Tell me about some of the places where it did take you.
Oh my goodness. Well, as I mentioned, I was writing for the Canyon News over the summer. I believe it was 96 or 97. I did a series of stories on former WT football people that had gone on to play or coach at the professional level. And I had the opportunity to write a story on Alondra Johnson, who was played here in 85, 86 through the Bill Kelly era, and had gone on to become the CFL's all-time leading tackler. We hit it off and really kind of developed a relationship that went past journalist and athlete. And he had a contract that was about to expire, and we had talked a lot of X's and O's because I was still a football junkie. I loved watching film with Coach Cornelius and those guys. And he said, man, I want you to be my agent. I'm like, first of all, I'm 19 years old. Secondly, I'm not a lawyer. Third, I don't have a clue about negotiating a contract. I'm trying to work at Office Depot and ref basketball games and pass my finals. And he just kept encouraging me. First of all, I need your help on this contract. Second of all, I think you can do it. So on a whim, I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. Contacted the CFL Players Association and took their bar exam, and their bar, it's an exam over your knowledge of their collective bargaining agreement. Aced it. And so at 20 years old, I became the youngest certified agent in professional sports history. Not long after that, I was able to partner up with Brett Lowy, who's an attorney and an NFLPA agent in New Jersey. And that's just history, so to speak, in terms of how we got the agency started. Do
you have anybody in the radio industry, sports radio industry, that you kind of try to emulate, or who inspired you a little bit?
Well, I think about when I started my show, I didn't want to be that guy that was rude to callers. I wanted my show to be interactive and for people to have the chance to have their voice be heard. Mm-hmm. I say that on the show a lot. It's your chance, it's your opportunity to speak your mind. I didn't want to be Jim Rome and buzzing people or keeping the guy on hold for 45 minutes just to cut him off. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be a talk show host that was, I wanted to come off as full of myself or that I've got all the answers or that I'm preaching ever. So to say if anybody's really influenced me, I can't really say. I just knew some guys that I didn't want to emulate. That answers your question.
I guess I'm not a big fan of some of those guys either.
Many of my listeners aren't.
Well, back to the boss lady.
Mm-hmm.
I assume she's going to be one of the answers to this question, but tell me about some of the people who have helped you accomplish the things that you set out to accomplish with this radio show.
She was a tremendous influence because she had my back. I had spent 11 years in pro football. For a variety of reasons, decided it was time to get out, time to make a change. Didn't have a plan, and I was okay with her. She just kept encouraging me, A, to come up with a plan, and B, to follow my passion. Don't go back into corporate America. Don't go get a regular 9-to-5 job. Figure it out. Find a way to make it happen. And her always had my back, always encouraging me, challenging me at times, when I was getting down on myself or getting lazy or satisfied, or she just always kept pushing me, So she's had a tremendous influence on the success of the show and checking my ego, not letting me get too full of myself, challenging me on football-related issues, things I'm talking about, trying to keep me consistent. She's my biggest critic and my biggest fan at the same time, and I definitely have to give her the vast majority of the success of the show. I think rests on her shoulders.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how your show is taking a huge step forward in the syndication deal. Tell me how that came about, when it came about, and some of the particulars of it.
Nielsen ratings came out, I guess, in July of 2009, which was roughly after a year of me being on the air. Mm-hmm. And the numbers were pretty staggering. July of 2010, they came out again, and I had surpassed, in this market in Amarillo, I'd surpassed Jim Rome and surpassed Mike and Mike in terms of ratings. Mm-hmm. And that time slot where I'm at is right after Mike and Mike and right before Jim Rome. So I've got a great time slot. What I'm discussing isn't old news. It hasn't been hit on for 6 or 7 hours throughout the day. And it's all those things kind of fell into place, but the ratings is what really, the people who are sponsoring my show and spending money to support my family and support the show don't spend money because of those ratings, but it sure helps in terms of talking about the influence and how many people are tuned in to MPIF radio each day. And after the ratings came out last summer of 2010, second year in a row, where I've seen a steady increase, and then for this market at least, it passed the top 2 talk shows in the country. Started hunting for agents, met up with some folks in New York City, and kind of challenged them to help me grow it, take it to another level. And over the course of 6 to 9 months, figured out a way to make it happen. The guys at Radio Colorado with Pilgrim Broadcasting have had a lot of success, not necessarily in the sports broadcasting, but in syndicating other talk shows. Mm-hmm. Yeah, A, they've got the equipment to do it, and B, they've got the experience and the know-how, and C, it was in just a wonderful part of the country that was appealing to us. If we had to move the family, A, it was time to do it, and B, what a better place to do it than the Denver area.
Yeah, you're leaving behind a lot of fans, and I think a lot of them are jealous, myself included. That's just beautiful up there. Love the mountains.
It is.
Well, tell me a little bit. First of all, do you know how many markets you will be in at the onset?
First and foremost, we've got to get Amarillo up and current and get the equipment and technical side of that lined out. But we've got agreements in place with 13 stations across the country, including ESPN 1440 here in Amarillo. And that'll put my reach at somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million a day. Potential listeners a day. Once everything's up and running, but it's a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, so it's going to take a little bit of time. But
this might be a cliche question, but how does that make you feel?
It's flattering that this many people would have an interest in listening to the show, but it's also a challenge because you can't have a bad show. You can't have mediocre effort. It's much like playing and coaching again. Mm-hmm. You have to be competitive. You have to always challenge yourself to entertain. And part of what I'm doing is entertaining. Part of what I'm doing is informing people. And then part of what I'm doing is allowing my listeners to be part of the show. So I've got to make sure that I'm 100% on all three aspects of the show each and every day. Because if I'm not, if some part's lagging, or I just don't bring my A game, there's a chance I'm going to lose the listener who hasn't been listening. The folks here in the Texas Panhandle for 2.5, 3 years. So every show's got to be great. Every show's got to have the potential to gain more listeners.
What do you think you're going to miss about the Texas Panhandle?
High school football. The Friday Night Lights experience. I've lived it as a player, and as a kid dreamed about when I was going to get my chance to be the quarterback of the Randall Raiders and play at Kimbrough Stadium. And that is, man, I've been on college campuses, I've evaluated athletes, but what kids get to experience here on Friday nights, all across the state of Texas, certainly, but here in the Texas Panhandle is something that is just, and sometimes I have difficulty putting it into words how special that experience is. So I'm definitely going to miss just the electricity of a Friday night in Texas Panhandle, whether it's a big school, Emerald High Tascosa or Bovina Farwell, just that Friday Night Lights experience and what it means to everybody involved, from the grandparents, the old timers who've seen every game since whenever, down to the little girls who are dreaming about being a cheerleader. Everybody has some piece of what goes on Friday nights. Mm-hmm.
Well, what is it about Colorado that you look forward to, and particularly from a football fan and sports fan perspective?
Well, I've developed a really, really good relationship with Steve Fairchild, the head coach at Colorado State, and Tim Duffy, who coaches their defensive backs. Those guys have really been open to let me bounce ideas off of them, and I've always been a fan of Colorado State, so I'm going to enjoy getting a chance to be closer to those guys and closer to that program. And from a football perspective, man, Northern Colorado, Colorado State, Wyoming, Colorado Buffaloes, Denver Broncos, all right there where we're at. I'm just going to be on football overload in terms of getting to see it in person and covering it. So I'm just excited about the amount of high-level college and pro football right there in just a small radius of where my house would be.
The AFC West fan bases are all a bit unique too, I would think.
Yes, they are.
So,
I'm curious to see
Denver and KC.
Yeah. Curious to see Raider Nation and the Chiefs and Charger fans, and see how they roll into Denver and how they behave or don't. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit back to what you'll miss about the Panhandle. Mm-hmm. You can't tailor your show as much to what's going on here as you were before. Although you've always spent a lot of time talking about and talking with NFL insiders. So to talk a little bit about how your show will change a little bit, but yet still be appealing to the people here where you started.
Part of my show is, the college and pro football discussion. Part of it is the my favorite part of it is the legends of the game, where I bring on legendary players and coaches and get caught up with those guys. Won't be talking high school football, unfortunately, but the bottom line is people in Topeka, Kansas, or Tucson, Arizona, Jacksonville, Florida aren't going to care about Amarillo High Tascos anymore. So to kind of increase that the appeal to listeners nationwide, I'll probably be talking more MMA, mixed martial arts, and boxing. More current interviews of current players that are in the NFL and in the college game, and try to ramp that up a little bit in terms of folks that are currently in the game, in terms of interviews. Continue with my legend stuff, but more currently.
Can you mention some of the markets that are already on board?
Yeah, on paper, I can't mention them all, but Topeka, Kansas, Tucson, Arizona, Jacksonville, Florida, Little Rock, Arkansas, just off the top of my head, Casper, Wyoming, Fort Collins.
Now I want to move into one of the other areas I wanted to talk to you about, but I kind of was curious how it fit in with where you came from. When you came back to Amarillo, you took a job as one of the coaches for the Dusters. Is that correct?
General manager.
And ended up the general manager job. So my assumption is that high school football, certainly you were aware of it, but to the extent of wanting to be such a big part of it, how did that fit in? How did that get to that point?
Like you said, played and experienced it, kind of got away from it, when I was involved in pro football from the agency perspective. And then once I got a chance to get back into coaching and then going into management, one of the first things I did in 2004, we were on our playoff run with the Amarillo Dusters. And of course, we won the IFL championship that year. But a lot of the guys on our team were not from this part of the country. Really outstanding players, but they didn't know much about trying out lines. And our season kind of ran late that year because of our playoff push. And had the opportunity to take them out to go see Randall and Amarillo High at Big Ribbon Stadium. And I thought, man, this is going to be a treat. First of all, they're going to see my Raiders roll up the Sandies, and second of all, they're going to get to see Dick Ribbon Stadium. So we get all the guys to the stadium, and just it was amazing to see their jaws drop, and they're pulling out their camera phones, taking pictures, and just watching them freak out about the size of the crowd, how big Dick Ribbon Stadium was, and just the intensity and the atmosphere of a high school game. That was awesome to see, but it also kind of reinvigorated me. It gave me a reminder about how special Friday Night Lights in the Texas Panhandle is. And, that kind of stayed in the back of my mind when we started thinking about doing a high school show out at the Big Texan and talking high school football.
So that eventually led to the combine. Was it the very next year you started? That was probably like 2 to 3 years later?
A couple years later, actually 4 years later. That was in the fall of 2004, and we did the first combine in May of 2008. But really, what got me thinking about the combine a year earlier was just noticing that not much had changed. It was still all reactionary recruiting in terms of, if you're good enough, you'll get noticed. And I really started thinking about how many college campuses I'd been on, how many practices I'd seen, how much college tape I'd looked at from guys from all levels, D1, 1AA, D2 athletes that were trying to play at the next level. It really kind of got me thinking about, man, I know what talent looks like. There's a lot of talented players on Friday nights, because I'd started going to games again, and I started getting the wheels turned. Why aren't these kids getting a chance? What's going on? It's the same thing. I talked about my team my senior year at Randall. Gosh, we should have had a dozen guys go play D1, 1AA, D2 at least, and we didn't.
Any of them at all?
You know what? I think Dimitri McFarland played at Eastern New Mexico. Jared Taylor walked on at Angelo State. That was about it. We should have had a lot more. And it's not all on the coaches. I mean, don't get me wrong. We were just all uneducated on the process, but it was the same, not just at Randall High School, all the schools in Texas Panhandle. Just at that time, you just relied on colleges to contact you and to roll through and look. And that was probably about the time that colleges stopped recruiting the Texas Panhandle in general. So, to kind of get back to the original point, that got me thinking, in the back of my mind that something wasn't quite right. And then after signing day in February of 2008, that was when I made the decision. And this is college. So April of 2008 is when we did the first time.
Who helped you get this started?
Oh gosh, lots of people. A lot of my coaching influences. Mike Lozano was a tremendous help. David Flowers, obviously, who's now up at Perryton, but had started the program at Bushland, offered to let me use his facility. That was big. So I made some calls, and other places wanted thousands of dollars to be able to put on the event at their stadium, and he offered it to me and thought it was a great idea. Brian Welps out at River Road, who played college football, was passionate about helping kids. Ken Plonk, tremendous. He was at Randall at the time, now at Mount Tascosa. Don DeMoser out at Hereford has just been a great influence on me in terms of being able to bounce ideas off. Mike Burt up at Dumas. He's partially sane. I mean, he's a little out there, but has become a great friend, and he played Division I football at Rice. He's been a great guy to talk to. And there's been a bunch of other coaches here in the area. Blake Bryant at Canyon's been real supportive. Brian Wood at Randall. But there's still, frankly, a lot of coaches aren't really on board with it. It still kind of have that old school mentality that, hey, if you're good enough, you'll get found. And like I said, when we were talking the other day, those days are over. Just because you're good enough does not mean you'll be found. You have to be proactive, especially in this area of the country. So numbers are there. The impact it's had is tremendous. But yeah, there's been a lot of coaches who've stepped the game up and helped me and said, hey, you need to back off on this. You need to push on this. Here's a suggestion. And there's been a lot of guys here in this area that's been awesome to me.
Coach Flowers is great. When I started that website, my own website, he said, whatever we can do. Actually, it was his son, Stephen, that told me that, but they're both great guys, and I'm glad Stephen got that job out there at Bushland. That's fine, but very, very helpful person.
That's always our attitude. Whatever we can do, get it done.
Right. Do you have any ideas about starting one of these in Denver?
Yeah, that's just like with the radio show in terms of what I do at the Combine. That's definitely phase 2, is growing this. Not that the Denver area is under recruiting, but part of what I want to do is to help kids understand that just because you might be physically a late bloomer doesn't mean you can't play college football. My younger brother Slade is a prime example of that. Did make his varsity team until his senior year at Randall. Weighed maybe 150 pounds when he graduated. Wasn't a starter. Played 4 years of college football on scholarship.
You don't weigh 150 pounds now.
He doesn't weigh 150 pounds now. He's a rocked up 200-pounder. A great athlete. Some guys are late bloomers. Some guys, are unlucky in that they play on a bad team. Some guys are unlucky in that they get hurt their senior year. I mean, there's all kinds of factors that can go into why a kid can't play. But what I want to be able to continue to do here in Texas Panhandle and in Denver and other parts of the country is, if a kid has the dream of playing college football, I want to give them the tools to try to make that dream become reality. Because so many guys have that story of not being heralded recruit coming out of high school, and we're watching them on Sunday. I want guys to at least pursue those opportunities, so if they don't look back when they're 34 like me and wonder what could have, should have been. I want these guys to pursue that and pursue getting an education as well. And that's part of that college football experience.
Sure.
So yeah, Denver area. I want those kids to kind of continue to pursue that. Now there obviously is a large contingent of Division II schools in Colorado, plus the schools I mentioned earlier. Wyoming, Colorado State, Colorado, Northern Colorado, they all recruit that area, plus the D2s. There's a lot of kids. Denver's a big city. Colorado got some good football players, so I want those kids to be able to pursue those opportunities.
Do you have, besides the Colorado State staff, have you developed any contacts up there that might be able to help you with this?
Yeah, Ernest Collins, the new head coach at Northern Colorado, he is an alum of UNC and spent a lot of time in the SWAC. He's back up there in Greeley, and he and I have hit it off really well. I think it's going to be a good relationship that we can develop. And of course, Dave Christensen and Marty English and those guys at Wyoming, I've gotten real close with them. Dave comes on my show quite often, and Marty is now recruiting this area for Texas Panhandle. I think I'll be trying to do some stuff up in the Wyoming area as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you need to tell us about your combine, about your aspirations for it?
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of people ask me about is how many kids you got? How many kids are playing D1 ball? And I think it's important for us to remember not everybody's a D1 football player.
Right.
Not everybody's cut out for Division I football. We've got a bunch of kids playing Division II. Alejandro's at 1AA Prairie View A&M. The coaches are on fire about him. But a lot of kids playing Division II football and NAIA football that are getting education. Some are all they're paid for, continuing to play football.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, just as special as Andrew Hudson and the opportunity he got at Oklahoma State, or the Bushland boys up at CSU, on and on and on. These kids are playing D2 football. That's awesome, too.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And the money, I said that when we were talking the other day, did the math. We've got kids that from the Texas Panhandle area that are like 37 different schools. Emailed all those coaches, got the info back. In 3 years, got $1.15 million in scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Kids will be playing under this fall. That's a lot of money, And had we not put on the events, and these guys still would have gone on to play college football, but definitely a lot of kids are getting a lot of school paid for that would not have been able to pursue that dream if they didn't have this catalyst of getting them
Right. One last area that we can talk about a little bit is MMA.
Love it.
Love it.
Yeah.
You've really gotten into that.
Mm-hmm.
You're a voice for it here in the Panhandle. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I first saw my first MMA fight. It's funny, buddy of mine, Daryl Ware. I think surely we've passed the statute of limitations, but this is early 90s, and his dad, Dave, great dude, had cable descrambler. And this is when UFC was not legal in many states, and so we had the cable descrambler, and we're watching like UFC 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we were wild for it. Oh my gosh, I just remember how exhilarating those fights were, and I've always just been a fan of the fight game, and grew up watching boxing on ABC's Wild World of Sports, watching Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard and all those guys, and the characters and personalities that they had. So I've kind of always on the periphery followed, UFC and mixed martial arts, and then really got into it with Shark Fights, who's a local promotion, who they themselves are in the process of becoming a national promoter. Put on fights here and asked if they could come on my show and talk about it. I was shoot, yeah, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And then in doing so, man, I had the opportunity to do the first MMA broadcast over radio airwaves here in the U.S.
Wow.
So being able to call the blow-by-blow action has been a lot of fun. Done that for Shark Fights, and I'll probably continue that with a couple of organizations in Denver and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So I've got some good opportunities there. And you know what, in terms of all the MMA fighters, promoters I've had on my show, they've all been perfect gentlemen and professionals, and they're as serious about their sport as pro football guys are. It's a year-round. Their training, their diet, the money involved, everything about it, they treat it just like other professional athletes that are on my show. So got a lot of respect for what those guys do. And hey, I'm from Texas, man. We all like a good fight.
Those guys also aren't the guys that you want to, after you've had one too many, try and pick a fight with.
They're not the dudes to mess with. Yes.
Because they don't look that big, maybe.
No, they might weigh 145, but they bring it like a 300-pounder. That's for sure.
Well, I guess that should probably wrap it up.
We talked about a lot of stuff.
We did, and I appreciate.
I want to thank you again, though, Philip. What you guys are doing at TexasPanhandleSports.com. A, there was no internet when I was playing, but B, if we'd had that back during my time, I think it would have had a lot of impact on kids in this area. And not, I'm a football guy and a fight guy, but what you do with volleyball and baseball and basketball and all the sports, anything that you can do to help promote kids, I'm in favor of, and what you've done at TexasPanhandleSports.com. You've put some kids on the map as well.
Well, I appreciate you saying
I
that.
give you the thumbs up on that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. Good luck to everything you do in the future.
Thank you.
I know it's going to be good. I know it's going to be worth hearing about.
Glad to be partnering up with you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Warren.
All right.